Your Excellency, Chief Justice Richard Banda, SC, retired, Right Honorable Kumbo Kachali, Vice President of the Republic of Malawi, Right Honorable Henry Banda, MP, Speaker of the National Assembly, Your Lordship, the Acting Chief Justice, Honorable Anastasia Sosa, Justices of Appeal and Judges of the High Court, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Deputy Speakers, Honorable Leader of the House, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Members of Parliament, leaders of political parties represented in Parliament, Your Excellency, Madam Tandwed Mushena, Dean of the Diplomatic Corps and Heads of Diplomatic Missions, Mrs. Hawa Ndilowe, Chief Secretary to the Government, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a great pleasure to be here this morning to preside over the opening of the 2013-2014 budget meeting and deliver the State of the Nation address. This occasion is very significant because, as is tradition, we reflect on the past year and set out our plans for the coming year and the future. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you all know, I took office on 7th April 2012 under very difficult circumstances and amidst many uncertainties. Our economy was on the verge of collapse. Most of the cooperating partners had expressed huge concerns over our situation of poor human rights and economic governance, to the extent that others suspended their direct budget support to Malawi. There was a spirit of despair in the country. Mr. Speaker, sir, against this background, in my State of the Nation address on 18th of May last year, I clearly set out my vision to eradicate poverty through economic growth and wealth creation. In my address, I spelled out the two objectives of my government, namely, one, to unlock the potential of the Malawian people to regain their freedom, dignity, and sense of pride, and thereby give Malawi the opportunity to realize her social, political, and economic freedoms. And two, to drive a people's development agenda that enhances opportunities, reduces inequalities, and overcomes poverty through its political, social, and economic programs. I called upon all Malawians to join me to work together and rebuild our economy. I also announced a national austerity drive that would be painful but necessary. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to acknowledge all sectors of our society, private sector, non-government organizations, the faith community, traditional leaders, and the general public for the support and resilience demonstrated in the past year. I also wish to extend my gratitude to the development partners for the support in various forms that they provided to my government in the past year. As a result of decisive action by my government to institute reforms that would recover the economy, we have started to experience the first signs of recovery. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am pleased that even though prevailing circumstances forced us to make some difficult decisions, they were the right decisions. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm very thankful that Malawians have stood with me and continue to do so as we start to see the fruits of our reforms. Mr. Speaker, sir, indeed we must remember that the road to the full recovery is long. I therefore wish to appeal to all Malawians to remain steadfast and resilient until we reach the full recovery we envisage. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the last year, my government has focused on laying the foundations for healing and recovery. Building on these foundations will be the focus for the next phase. We are called upon to set new goals, to guide us along the road to recovery and transformation, to sketch a landscape in which we can act on our collective dream, and to draft a plan to deliver us from the consequences of our past mistakes. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we continue to reconstruct Malawi and reclaim the whole country for all, we break down the divisions and attitudes of the past. We free everyone from the last forces of oppression and cynicism. The emerging period must be a period of all Malawian people to continue working together, building the nation. For it is only when we strive towards this unity as a people with one destiny that we will release our energies, enabling us to fully rebuild this great nation. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is our task to make the most of our freedom, to entrench it as a fundamental and permanent feature of our existence. It is our task to continue to work for democracy and continue good governance in the coming years, ensuring that peace and stability prevail throughout this country. It is our task to manage the economy with prudence and diligence to ensure inclusive growth and prosperity. The challenge facing each and every one of us is contribute to a complete, rounded picture of the emerging period. Mr. Speaker, sir, the theme of my address is therefore Malawi on the road to transformation. Mr. Speaker, sir, I believe that we have laid a solid foundation for hope, prosperity, and growth. During the year under review, we have brought Malawi back from the brink, politically, financially, and economically. We are now in a position where we can begin to focus more clearly on the long term. Restoring governance. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the last year, my administration sought to restore the foundations for good governance, freedom, and human rights in Malawi as the underpinnings of the development of our nation, both in the short term and in the long term. My government has repealed most of the oppressive laws that impinged on people's freedoms and rights. These include Section 46 of the Penal Code, which empowered the Minister of Information to close media houses. New media operations are free to start up as my government has liberalized the issuance of radio and TV licenses based on the quality of their application and not on political considerations. Organizations that were refused licenses can now operate freely without harassment, restrictions, and violence against journalists. I note that these changes have contributed to Malawi being the country which made the biggest leap in the 2013 World Press Index on press freedom. As a result of my government's actions, Malawi has moved from position 146 in 2012 to position 75 in 2013. Citizens are now able to organize demonstrations without government interference or violence against them. The January 17th demonstrations organized by Consumer Association of Malawi, Kama, are a clear testimony to my government's commitment to freedom of assembly and expression. We have also seen tolerance and mutual respect return to government's relationships with civil society leaders and organizations where they are recognized as true partners in Malawi's development. Looking forward, my government is committed to the democratic process and free and fair elections in 2014 and beyond. We have already passed the Constitution Amendment Bill 2012 to allow the holding of tripartite elections next year. We have also appointed commissioners for the Malawi Electoral Commission from all political parties. Mr. Speaker, sir, through all these measures, we have shown our commitment to fundamentally transform the way that the government relates to its people and how government works for its people. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to assure this august House that these governance success stories will be deepened in the coming year, and my government is committed to democratic governance, dialogue, rule of law, and access to justice. Microeconomic stability. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me highlight the fiscal performance for the first half and third quarter of the 2012-2013 financial year and thereafter. The proposed fiscal plan for the 2013-2014 budget. As you may be aware, Mr. Speaker, sir, when my administration ascended into office, the extended credit facility program with the IMF resumed. Since the resumption of the program, 2 reviews have been successfully undertaken in November 2012 and March 2013, respectively. Mr. Speaker, sir, to date, a total of $274 million has been released as balance of payment support after meeting most of the agreed program targets, signifying a step in the right direction. This amount excludes the other forms of support that my government has received from cooperating partners, such as for emergency drugs procurement, as well as project support. In the just ended ECF review, Mr. Speaker, so I'm pleased to inform the August House that my government met most of the quantitative targets, including the net international reserves and net domestic borrowing. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government adopted a tight fiscal regime anchored by no net domestic financing, meaning that at the end of the financial year, net domestic borrowing should be 0. The main purpose of the fiscal anchor is to control expenditure overruns and assist the building of foreign reserves and bring down inflation. Mr. Speaker, sir, in spite of the many challenges facing the government, the fiscal performance for the 2012-2013 financial year was on track. Overall, domestic revenues surpassed the target of 0.6 billion kwacha, largely on account of tax revenues, which amounted to 120.9 billion kwacha, against a program target of 118.9 billion kwacha. However, non-tax revenues underperformed by 1.5 billion kwacha, largely on account of low collection from fuel levies and revenue collecting departments, such as lands and housing and road traffic. Mr. Speaker, sir, government contained its expenditures within the target. A total of 242.6 billion kwacha was spent against a mid-year target of 249.8 billion. Mr. Speaker, sir, on the basis of the developments above, government repaid domestic debt amounting to 18.2 billion kwacha against a repayment target of 17.7 billion kwacha, a slight overperformance by 0.5 billion kwacha, and thereby reduced the stock of domestic debt from 188.9 billion to 170.7 billion kwacha. Mr. Speaker, sir, the fiscal performance for the third quarter of 2012-2013 financial year continues to be encouraging, giving confidence that our NDA target will be met. Domestic revenues continued to perform well, exceeding the target of 66 billion kwacha by 5.3 billion kwacha. We, however, missed the target of dedicated grants by 7.7 billion kwacha on the education swap. Mr. Speaker, sir, the projected expenditure for the third quarter of 2012-2013 was 119.3 billion. However, 120.9 billion was spent, representing a marginal over-expenditure of 1.6 billion. This was largely on account of underperformance of dedicated grants and thereby missing the domestic borrowing target by about 3.0 billion kwacha. We are, however, optimistic that by close of the year, we will recover and meet all our targets. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you might be aware, the major pressure points on the budgeted expenditure during the quarter emanated from wage and salary increases. In order to meet this demand, a corresponding cut was made across the board on other expenditure lines, especially other recurrent transactions, ORT, so as to remain within the targets. Mr. Speaker, sir, going forward to the end of 2012-2013 fiscal year, we expect to remain within our targets. I'm aware of the many pressure points. However, it will be very critical that we remain on target if we are to consolidate and sustain the progress achieved so far. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Ministry of Finance has developed a medium-term microeconomic framework from 2013-2014, 2015 and 2016 financial years. Mr. Speaker, sir, the framework draws lessons from the successes as well as implementation challenges of the 2012-2013 budget, which was aimed at initiating and galvanizing recovery from the economic slowdown experienced prior to the reforms. Mr. Speaker, sir, precedent to the development of the framework was the following actual performance of the economy and underlying assumptions. Mr. Speaker, sir, the gross domestic product growth for 2012 was revised downward from an earlier estimate of 1.9% to 1.8%. The economy is, however, expected to rebound as GDP growth surges to around 5.0%, underscoring the success of the economic reforms that my administration implemented in 2012. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, prospects for 2014 indicate that the economy will grow at an accelerated pace of 6.1% as the policy measures we implemented in 2012 take full effect. Mr. Speaker, sir, inflation is expected to be relatively high for the remainder of the year. We, however, expect a sharp deceleration in inflation in 2014 to an average of 7.4%. My administration will therefore continue to pursue with vigor to bring down inflation and achieve a continued appreciation of the local currency to a sustainable level. Mr. Speaker, sir, building on the 2012-2013 financial year, fiscal consolidation and supportive monetary policies aimed at restoring and recovering the macroeconomic environment will continue. In this regard, the fiscal anchor for the 2013-2014 financial year shall be a continued no-net domestic financing with a net repayment of domestic debt of 0.5% of GDP, which is equivalent to 6.8 billion kwacha by the end of the financial year. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, sir, the 2013-2014 budget aims to provide a consistent and coherent economic policy framework to underpin our development objectives. The emphasis continues to be on enhancing the sustainability of growth and development through policies that consolidate economic stability, reinforce resilience to shocks, both internal and external, further improve public financial management, and support private sector-led growth. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important at this point in time for the August House to note that there is need to finance the 2014 tripartite elections. The 2013-2014 financial year budget will be contractionary, resulting in a number of pressures that are anticipated in the course of implementation. Allocations to ministries and departments will be constrained due to limited resources. It will therefore be necessary that government ministries and departments be economical in the use of resources allocated to them. Only priority activities should be undertaken. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to appeal to the nation to continue to be understanding and appreciate the situation our nation is in. For us to build the economy, we need the support from all the people of Malawi. The developments we have seen in the past 12 months must give us hope that the reforms are working. Yes, there has been pain, and we may continue experiencing pain, though at a reduced level for some time. This is expected in any situation like we found ourselves in. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is expecting a miracle for one to recover from the economic deathbed without feeling pain. The pain we are suffering is the price we are paying for allowing ourselves into the situation we found ourselves in. It is my hope and prayer that we will learn from the past and accept that procrastinating to take tough decisions for short-term gains or to feed our personal political greed will always lead to painful situations. Removing bottlenecks to economic growth. Mr. Speaker, sir, when I took over government, the private sector had challenges with the predatory tax audits and unfair and arbitrary appeals procedures by the Malawi Revenue Authority. All these problems are now history. Government has reviewed and simplified the tax regime to make it friendly to business, investors, and to support our job creation agenda. Mr. Speaker, sir, procedures for business licensing, work permits, and visas have also been reviewed and simplified to encourage foreign investment and tourism into Malawi. Mr. Speaker, sir, upon assuming power, government quickly resolved the fuel supply challenges that gripped the country. The prudent microeconomic policies that were put in place have made it possible for us to procure fuel on a sustained basis, such that our fuel stocks have increased from being negative to 11 days. Government will now focus on increasing storage capacity. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government also revived the Millennium Challenge Compact, which was suspended by the United States government. I'm further pleased that the MCA Malawi office is now established and setting all background work for the implementation of the compact. Government has signed the World Bank-funded interconnector electricity project with the Mozambican government. Negotiations with many independent power producers in the energy sector are at very advanced stages. These initiatives, Mr. Speaker, sir, are aimed at creating a conducive environment for economic growth in our country, as energy is key to any meaningful development. Increasing and diversifying exports. Mr. Speaker, sir, one of my government's significant achievements has been to intensify the production and diversification of cash crops that have a bearing on our exports. Government approved the integrated production system last year. Following this approval, tobacco buyers started supporting our farmers by contracting them to produce good quality tobacco in order to attract premium prices on the market. The total projected volume for the 2012-2013 marketing season is about 156 million kgs, almost double the 79 million kgs sold in the 2011-2012 season. The projected volume is expected to realize more than $300 million as compared to $177 million in the 2011-2012 season. Mr. Speaker, sir, since the opening of the tobacco marketing season, our farmers have been offered better prices on average than last year. Projections for other cash crops like cotton, tea, coffee, maize, rice, and legumes have also increased this year. Mr. Speaker, sir, last year I launched the National Export Strategy 2013 to 2018 to boost exports, create employment, and enhance revenues. The NEC sets out a path to diversify into new export sectors and crucially move from exporting raw commodities to value-added goods. To do this, the NEC has looked at those areas where Malawi has a natural competitive advantage, those industries with scope for value addition, and crucially where there is strong and growing demand. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government has operationalized the all stakeholders, trade, industry, and private sector development working group in order to facilitate and fast-track the implementation and monitoring of the national export strategy. Reorganizing industry. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government recognizes that the private sector is the engine of economic growth. For years now, government business in the market had been too big. My government is committed to reducing the scale of government in order to unlock the potential of the private sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, government has undertaken to restructure the tobacco industry, and the review of the Tobacco Act is underway. The Act will reorganize and streamline sector policy coordination. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will establish the first ever tea auction floors in Malawi later this year. This will allow tea to be sold here in the country. It is hoped that this will help Malawi maximize foreign exchange earnings from tea sales. Furthermore, Malawi will be able to overcome the foreign exchange lean period experienced between October and March. The livestock industry has also been reorganized to promote dairy, meat, and leather subsectors. This is to encourage diversification out of agriculture into manufacturing and agro-processing. Government has already engaged investors to set up factories in dairy, meat, and leather. Mr. Speaker, sir, government is in discussion with the Nyasa Manufacturing Company to enter into a public-private partnership for the expansion of their cigarettes manufacturing factory. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm pleased to inform this August House that a Dubai-based company is establishing a textile factory here in Malawi. The company has already identified a site and opened their offices in Lilongwe. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm pleased to report that earlier this year I visited a state-of-the-art agro-processing facility for production and exportation of mango and banana pulp, which is under construction. The project is managed by Malawi Mangoes Operations Limited in Salima and is the first of its kind in Malawi. It will set the pace for an increasingly dynamic and diversified agro-processing sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government also remains committed to promoting the cotton industry as a way of broadening our export base. During the 2012-2013 financial year, government supported farmers with extension services and distributed 38,918 metric tons of certified cotton seed under the cotton upscaling program. Mr. Speaker, sir, one great achievement in the cotton subsector this year was the passing of the Cotton Act by this House. The Act provides for a regulatory framework in the cotton industry and facilitates the participation of the private sector in the production and processing of cotton. In the next few months, my government will be commissioning cotton ginneries in Chikwawa, Salima, and Karonga districts. Mr. Speaker, sir, Sunseed Oil Limited is putting up a plant to process such crops as soybean, sunflower, and groundnuts into edible oils and animal feed for both local and export markets. This will help Malawi save $45 million in oil imports. Furthermore, the company projects that it will earn about $52 million from the export of soya cake. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government is also reorganizing non-agricultural sectors to promote greater investment and competition. In the area of transport, government is implementing an open sky policy to allow more and competitive flights in and out of Malawi. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to report that government has identified Ethiopian Airlines as a strategic partner for Air Malawi. The new Air Malawi 2012 Limited is expected to start operations once all the mandatory requirements have been fulfilled. As this August House may be aware, Mr. Speaker, sir, other airlines are also increasing their flights to Malawi. For the first time, we now have Kenya Airways and Ethiopia Airways flying into Blantyre. Mr. Speaker, sir, there are many other industrial projects that are in the pipeline. These investments clearly demonstrate the growing confidence in Malawi's economic recovery program. These initiatives will create jobs for our people, create local market for our farmers, and broaden foreign exchange reserve for our country. Social protection programs. Mr. Speaker, sir, under the social protection component of the ERP, my government has implemented policies and programs that are aimed at addressing the negative impact of the reforms. Such programs include the Public Works Program, Cash Transfer Program, School Feeding and Bursary Programs, and the Food Aid Program. These programs are designed to meet the need of vulnerable households. Mr. Speaker, sir, since July 12, my government has rolled out the Social Cash Transfer Program amounting to 24 billion Malawi kwacha. The program targeted 10% of the lowest ultra-poor and operated in 15 districts, namely Mchinji, Salima, Mangochi, Machinga, Chitipa, Likoma, Parombe, Nsanje, Chikwawa, Mwanza, Nino, Balaka, Mzimba, Zomba, and Mulanje. Mr. Speaker, sir, government plans to roll out the Social Cash Transfer Program to all 28 districts by June 2014. The program will reach a total of 315,000 households, benefiting 1.5 million Malawians. Mr. Speaker, sir, government is also implemented the Public Works Program in all 28 districts. In the 2012-2013 financial year, about 600,000 households benefited from the program. The government also specially targeted urban districts for implementation of this program in order to benefit the urban poor households. Mr. Speaker, sir, furthermore, my government distributed food to about 2 million families that were food insecure. In addition to this, 1.6 million children benefited from the school feeding program, which was rolled out in over 1,000 schools across the country. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I have earlier said, I wish to once again thank Malawians for the resilience and understanding during this difficult time. Enhancing income generation projects at household level. Mr. Speaker, sir, improving household incomes is high on my government agenda. In this regard, my government has put in place a number of initiatives to enhance income generation at household level. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government is implementing community savings and investment program in order to promote the culture of savings. Participants from social protection programs are encouraged to participate in savings and investment activities as a graduation process. This component aims at inculcating a culture of savings through capacity building in group dynamics, financial literacy, business management, skills training, and cooperative formation. To date, a total of 4,457 groups have been formed and are functional, comprising 99,153 members, of whom 65,441 are female and 33,712 are male participants. These 4,457 groups have mobilized a total of 672 million kwacha to date. These savings are used for on-lending for various small-scale businesses such as hawkers, restaurants, irrigation, pig farming, and chicken rearing. The groups will now participate in buying cash crops for exports. Mr. Speaker, sir, under the Presidential Initiative on Poverty and Hunger Reduction, my government committed resources for the promotion of legumes such as groundnuts, soya beans, and pigeon peas. These are high-value crops that have potential to increase household incomes. Mr. Speaker, sir, 100,000 smallholder farmers benefited from 1,570 metric tons of legume seed distribution under this program. It is expected that this will result in an estimated production of 40,000 metric tons of legume in the 2012-2013 cropping season. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the 2012-2013 financial year, my government distributed 8,680 goats and sheep to 140 groups, 5 groups per district. Furthermore, 12,600 farmers were trained on goat and sheep management under the small stock livestock production project. This program is on a person arrangement. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also launched a One Cow, a Family project aimed at helping poor families to increase their nutrition intake and enhance their household incomes. Through this project, 201 cows have so far been distributed to farmers in Palombe, Nchisi, Lilongwe, Zomba, Kota, and Mulanje districts. Mr. Speaker, sir, this project will also be implemented using the person principle. My government's target is for the program to reach 1 million families across the country by the end of 2015. Farmers in Nchisi and some parts of Lilongwe have been trained in cattle management and collar construction. Training is currently underway in Palombe, Zomba, Mulanje, and parts of Lilongwe. ERP medium-term focus areas. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me now turn to the 5 priority sectors of the ERP and highlight the progress that has so far been registered, as well as the priority projects that government has identified. Agriculture and food security. Mr. Speaker, sir, the agricultural sector is a key source of growth and employment in the country. It accounts for about 36% of GDP, 87% of total employment, and supplies more than 65% of the raw materials requirements for the manufacturing sector. It also feeds our nation and is central to our effort to reduce poverty. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government is therefore restructuring the agriculture sector to better serve our objectives of income growth, employment, and poverty reduction. Managing farming as a business. Mr. Speaker, sir, government is mobilizing farmers through extension services, farmers clubs, and cooperatives to move our farming community from subsistence to commercial farming. Government is also intensifying the popularization of the warehouse receipt scheme. The scheme provides a ready market for farmers and motivates them to take farming as a business. For industries, the scheme will guarantee supply of raw materials. As a nation, the scheme will help us aggregate national production, reduce post-harvest losses, build up our strategic reserves, and increase our opportunities for exports. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm pleased to report to this August House that the Export Development Fund, EDF, has earmarked $50 million for the scheme. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government will establish 2 departments in the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, one focusing on rural and subsistence farming, and another focusing on commercial farming. This is intended to make commercial farming a clear priority of my government. In this regard, one of the main focus areas of this new department will be commercialization of maize for both local and export markets. Diversification of export. Mr. Speaker, sir, our economy has depended mostly on 2 crops, maize and tobacco. This has constrained Malawi's ability to achieve sustainable growth. In view of this, my government has prioritized diversification of cash crops within the agriculture sector, including rice, cotton, coffee, cassava, and legumes such as groundnut, soya, sugar beans, pigeon peas, and sunflower. We are also promoting increased production of fruit-cured tobacco. Mr. Speaker, sir, in order to scale up the program, government embarked on production and distribution of quality seed for cotton, legumes, and cassava. Government is expanding integrated production system in the tobacco sector and also introducing contract farming in the cotton, cassava, and other crops. A delegation of small-scale tobacco farmers left for Zimbabwe to learn new technology in curing fruit-cured leaf. Mr. Speaker, sir, government has put in place deliberate policy to support private sector investment into agriculture, especially commercial farming. Government will make a concerted effort to remove investment barriers in such areas as land, energy and transport infrastructure, and in the issuance of permits. Expanding production. Mr. Speaker, sir, in addition to lack of diversification, one of the challenges Malawi faces is low agricultural production. To address this, my government is promoting 2 crops a year through expanded irrigation. Mr. Speaker, sir, this will be discussed in detail when I turn to irrigation sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, government has also introduced a special loan scheme for agricultural input called the Farm Input Loan Program. This is a public-private partnership program where private sector will offer loan facilities for inputs to deserving and qualifying farmers. It is my hope, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this program will scale up production of maize and other crops and enhance the country's food security, household incomes, and export earnings. Mr. Speaker, sir, this program will run side by side with the Farm Input Subsidy Program. The Farm Input Subsidy Program. Mr. Speaker, sir, under the Farm Input Subsidy Program, FISP, my government increased the number of beneficiaries from 1.4 million in 2011-2012 to 1.5 in 2012-2013 fiscal year. As a result, maize production is estimated to increase from about 3.5 million metric tons in the previous season to 3.6 million tons this year. This represents a 1.5% increase. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm pleased to inform this August House that this year, FISP program registered tremendous improvements. These include security of coupons and uncovering of some malpractices due to the participation of the police in the program. Mr. Speaker, sir, as this August House may be aware, there were some sporadic dry spells in the course of the season that will affect crop production, including maize, in districts like Rumpi, Mzimba, Salima, Lilongwe, Kasungu, and Deza. To mitigate this situation and ensure food security, my government is encouraging and supporting smallholder farmers to grow a second crop. Government will also ensure that surplus maize is moved to these districts in good time. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the coming year, my government will continue to implement the Farm Input Subsidy Program because it significantly contributes to economic growth and the attainment of food self-sufficiency. Livestock development. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government is aware and appreciates the important role that the livestock sector plays in our economy. Livestock contributes 11% of the gross domestic product and about 38% overall agricultural production to GDP. Livestock constitutes a very important part of food security. It is a reliable source of income through sales of animals and animal products. Furthermore, livestock products such as hides and milk are used as raw materials for industrial development. Mr. Speaker, sir, the cattle population has now gone up from 650,000 5 years ago to 1.2 million, whilst goat population has risen from 3.4 million to 5.2 million. Despite this improvement, my government will continue to provide support to livestock development through animal breeding programs, extension services, and improved animal health programs. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government has keen interest in working in close collaboration with the private sector and non-governmental organizations in this sector. In view of this, government will work closely with partners like the Haifa International, Malawi Milk Producers Association, and Feed the Future project in developing the livestock sector. ADMAC. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government acknowledges that the Agricultural Development and Marketing Corporation has not performed to the expectation of many Malawians. It has been a major burden on the budget and as this August House may be aware, ADMAC's current debt stands at about 6 billion Malawi kwacha. In view of this, my government has decided to restructure ADMAC so that it becomes viable and deliver on its mandate. Energy. Mr. Speaker, sir, the country continues to face a number of challenges in the energy sector. These include inadequate capacity to generate electricity and at intermittent supply. Consequently, economic activity in areas such as mining and manufacturing are affected. To address these problems, my government is implementing a number of projects. In the year under review, government registered the following key achievements. 1, continued to implement the Kapichira Hydropower Project Phase 2. I'm pleased to inform this Honorable House that Kapichira Hydropower Project Phase 2 will be commissioned in December this year. It will add 64 megawatts to the national grid. 2, distributed 2 million free energy saver bulbs across the country, which resulted in power savings of up to 45 megawatts. 3, started installation of a $6 million solar power plant that will add 850 kilowatts to the national electricity grid. The project is expected to be commissioned in August this year at Kamuzu International Airport in Lilongwe. 4, Malawi has signed a memorandum of understanding with Tibet of China to upgrade the eastern line from Mkula to Bwengu via Salima and Kotakota. And 5, the feasibility study has been finalized and project works are expected later this year. In the forthcoming financial year, my government plans to 1, implement the 3-year coal-fired power generation project, whose memorandum of understanding has already been signed with China Gezuba Construction, and 2, electrify 27 rural trading centers by December 2013 under the Malawi Rural Electrification Program. MAREP 7. Tourism. Mr. Speaker, sir, government's objective in the tourism sector is to ensure that Malawi becomes an attractive and competitive tourist destination. The tourism industry has the potential to generate foreign exchange earnings and create jobs. It is for this reason that my government has identified tourism to drive diversification out of agriculture. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government has therefore intensified campaigns in major international and regional markets of South Africa, United Kingdom, Germany, Switzerland, Netherlands, and China. In the 2013-2014 financial year, government will, 1, continue to promote private sector participation in the tourism industry by addressing bottlenecks that hinder private sector entry in the sector. 2, finalize the procurement of an operator for the Presidential Hotel, the Bingu Wamtarika International Conference Center, and Presidential Villas. This will promote Malawi as a leading destination for conference tourism. The operator will give a facelift to the President's Hotel and the Bingu Wamtarika International Conference Center by building a modern village between the hotel and Capitol Hill and a flyover to Sunbed Hotel, Capitol Hotel. 3, we will introduce tourist cruise vessels on Lake Malawi and Shire River. The project to build vessels has already started in Monkey Bay. This will create jobs for our people. And finally, construct an ultra-modern Malawi Institute of Tourism campus in Lilongwe. This project seeks to build capacity to the tourism sector in anticipation of the growing demand. Mining. Mr. Speaker, sir, the mining sector continued to grow steadily, and its contribution to the GDP grew from 3% in 2009 to 10% in 2012, resulting in a substantial increase in exports. my government continued implementing measures aimed at creating a conducive environment that encourages investment in the sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm pleased to inform the Honourable House that during the year under review, government has, 1, launched the Mines and Minerals Policy in April this year, which will, among other things, guide and promote sustainable development of the mining sector. 2, reviewed the Mines and Minerals Act, which will be tabled in this House before the end of this year. 3, issued exploration licenses to investors as one way of encouraging mining activities in the country. 4, undertook measures to organize small-scale miners into groups and cooperatives in order to promote artisanal and small-scale mining operations in the country. And finally, started developing a generic petroleum sharing agreement that will be used by all companies wishing to explore oil and gas in Malawi, and launched airborne geophysical mineral exploration program to be carried out by New Energy Gas of Australia in the Chikwawa and Nsanje districts. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the 2013-2014 fiscal year, government will, 1, continue to implement the Mining Growth and Governance Support Project with financial support from the World Bank and European Union. 2, introduce training courses in mining in our institutions of higher learning. I'm therefore pleased to inform this Honourable House that the Malawi Polytechnic and Constituent College of the University of Malawi has started developing a curriculum in mining. I'm pleased to announce that the government of Botswana has also offered full scholarships for Malawian students to study Bachelor of Science degree in Geology and Mining Engineering in Botswana. And finally, develop an artisanal and small-scale mining policy. Mr. Speaker, sir, with the current developments in the mining sector, it is projected that the sector's contribution to the country's GDP may rise from 10% to over 20% in the next 5 years. Infrastructure development. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government has made steady progress in the implementation of transport infrastructure projects that were prioritized in the ERP. Railway infrastructure. I'm pleased to report to this August House that construction of the new rail line from Kachaso in TA Chapananga in Chikwawa, passing through Mwanza and Neno districts to Nkaya in TA and Samala in Balaka, which I officially launched on 6 December 2012, has commenced and progress is already at over 25%. The project is wholly being financed by Valley and is estimated to cost around $1 billion US. It is expected to be completed by December 2014. Regarding the rehabilitation of the 201 kilometers Limbe, Makanga, Bangula, Sanje, Maka rail line, I would like to inform this August House that draft terms of reference for a request for proposals have been developed and consultations are currently underway to conduct feasibility studies. Preparatory works for the rehabilitation of the Limbe, Balaka, Salima, Lilongwe, Nchiji section of the Nekara corridor have been carried out. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government is currently undertaking ongoing spot emergency repairs of the existing rail line from Lilongwe to Balaka to ensure usability of the line. Road infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, sir, access to transport services is an important determinant of economic growth as it facilitates investments and growth in other sectors such as agriculture, mining, tourism, and manufacturing. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me at this point to outline some of the achievements that we registered in the transport sector during the 2012-2013 financial year. With regard to road transport, government continued to implement several projects with support from our cooperating partners. Some of the notable projects include the commissioning of the 101-kilometer Karonga-Chitipa Road, which was inaugurated in January this year. 2, the upgrading to bitumen standard of 25 kilometers of the Ikwendeni-Zondweni-Mtwaro Road, which was completed and inaugurated in January this year. 3, the maintenance and rehabilitation of a 46-kilometer section of the Chikwawa-Ngabu section of the Chikwawa-Sanje Road, and the completion and commissioning of a 74-meter-long new bridge across South Rukul River on the M1 road in Rumpi district. Mr. Speaker, sir, government commenced the construction of Lirongo Western Bypass Road, whose groundbreaking ceremony took place in January this year. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm pleased to report that some of the projects that had stalled due to a number of challenges, including delayed payments and fuel shortages, have resumed. These include reconstruction and rehabilitation of the Liwonde-Naminga Road and the 60-kilometer-long road, Zomba-Blanta Road. The Zomba-Blanta Road project is expected to be completed by March 2014. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the coming year under the ERP road transport subsector, government plans to upgrade 9 roads, namely Ncheu Tsangano Nenu Mwanza Road, Rumpi Nyika Chitipa Road, Lilongwe Old Airport Kasia Sante Road, Lilangwe Chingale Machinga Road, Mango Chichingo Malindi Makanjira Road, the Gender Edingen Road, the Chikwawa Chapananga Mwanza Road, and the Lilangwe Changarume Machinga Road, and the Lintipe Lobi Mitundu Road, as well as the continued rehabilitation and maintenance of the existing road network. On the Tekeran Road, I'm pleased to report that the constructor is already on site. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have directed that the 28 graders that are being kept at the Private Vehicle Hire Organization, PVHO, be distributed back to each district to develop rural roads in support of Mr. Speaker, sir, government continued rehabilitation and extension of the Chireka International Airport Terminal building. The works are expected to be completed within the first half of the 2013-2014 financial year. With respect to water transport, I wish to report that rehabilitation of the MV Ilala, which had developed serious defects, is almost complete. The ship was withdrawn from service for a comprehensive refit and is expected back in service by end of May 2013. Private sector development, industry and trade. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government prioritized the private sector as the engine for economic growth and is therefore pivotal to the implementation of the ERP. In this regard, government is implementing policies and strategies aimed at promoting a competitive and conducive environment for doing business and economic diversification. During the year under review, government removed restrictive business practices and legal provisions, as well as structural constraints, in order to improve Malawi's ranking in the Ease of Doing Business Survey Index from the low position of 157 out of 185 countries in 2013 into the top 100 countries in 2014, and continued to build capacity and strengthen the Competition and Fair Trade Commission for the agency to efficiently and effectively ensure fair play in the economy. Information and communication technology. Mr. Speaker, sir, information and communication technology, ICT, is one of the key pillars that facilitates sustainable economic growth. In this respect, government prioritized ICT for its recovery program. During the year under review, government commenced the development of a legal framework for the ICT sector and started the preparations for the migration from analog to digital television broadcasting. In the 2013-2014 fiscal year, government plans to finalize the Access to Information Bill and policy. 2, expand the government ICT network infrastructure from the capital city to all the 28 districts. 3, introduce a central electronic population register and a system for continuous and instant updating of records. And finally, establish a national data center that will rationalize data storage and data processing facilities. Youth development and empowerment. Mr. Speaker, sir, youth development and empowerment is critical for socio-economic development of the country. During the 2012-2013 financial year, government trained 5,435 young people in vocational and entrepreneurial skills and provided startup tools to various vocational technical centers, including Katuli in Mangochi, Perembe in Mzimba, DAP Mikolongwe in Chirazulu, Livingstonia Technical College in Rumpi, Area 25 in Lilongwe, Masache, and Bangula in Chikwawa. Government is implementing youth economic empowerment programs and projects to enhance their income earning capacity. I'm pleased to report that the construction works under the Integrated Youth Development at Neno have been completed. The center has production units for crop and animal husbandry, such as piggery, poultry, beekeeping, and fish farming. Sustainable economic growth, natural resources, and the environmental management. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government has intensified the implementation of measures aimed at integrating climate change mitigation and adaptation into development planning. During the period under review, the government developed the Environment and Climate Change Communication Strategy as a way of creating and enhancing public awareness on environment and climate change management issues. 2, developed a national climate change investment plan, which is expected to assist in the mobilization of investments in the management of climate change in Malawi. 3, developed the national climate change policy. 4, introduced a polluter pays principle and banned the use of thin plastics as a demonstration of our commitment towards the promotion of a green growth. 6, reviewed the Environmental Management Act in order to incorporate emerging issues in environmental management. 7, implemented the public-private partnership for sustainable land management project with support from the Global Environment Facility and the United Nations Development Programme in order to reduce land degradation in the Shire River Basin, and developed atomic energy regulations and approved the establishment of the Atomic Energy Regulatory Authority to oversee the implementation of nuclear programs in mining, medical, and industrial applications. Mr. Speaker, sir, turning to forestry management, I'm pleased to report that government continued implementing measures aimed at increasing the forest cover. Government, in collaboration with the civil society and the private sector, facilitated replanting of a total of 3,700 hectares of industrial timber plantations and signed 201 agreements with local communities for the co-management of the forest reserves. In the 2013-2014 fiscal year, my government will, 1, finalize the review of the National Forest Policy, National Forest Act, National Meteorological Policy, National Meteorological Act, and National Climate Change Act. 2, continue to address challenges besetting the sector, including deforestation, poor waste management, and pollution, and intensify enforcement of compliance with relevant laws and regulations. lands. Mr. Speaker, sir, turning to the land sector, my government remains committed to the provision of land management services to members of the general public and other stakeholders to ensure that development in the sector take place in an orderly and sustainable manner. In the 2012-2013 financial year, government made the following achievements in the area. 1. Approved the Land Bill 2012 and 11 other related legal instruments, which are currently awaiting enactment in 2 laws by this August House. 2. Facilitated the acquisition of Chikwawa Estate in Salima from Press Agriculture Limited for the Green Belt Initiative. And 3. Prepared the National Land Use Planning and Management Policy. Mr. Speaker, sir, government also made remarkable progress on the international boundary reaffirmation and demarcation exercise. I therefore wish to inform this August House that mapping for 399 kilometers of Malawi-Zambia boundary was completed and mapping for the remaining 239 boundary kilometer stretch is underway. Furthermore, government completed a joint field reconnaissance survey covering a total of 430 kilometers of a boundary stretch between Malawi and Mozambique in Palombe, Deza, and Sanje districts, and erected boundary pillars as a stretch covering 152 kilometers in these districts. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the coming financial year, government will continue to sensitize the general public about the Land Bill 2012 and prepare subsidiary legislation for its implementation and administration. Government will also adopt the National Land Use Planning and Management Policy. Employment and labor. Mr. Speaker, sir, government recognizes that employment and labor are key policy issues for sustainable economic growth and development. During the 2012-2013 financial year, government, 1, introduced the South Korea-Dubai employment program for the youth as one way of reducing youth unemployment and build their skills capacity. 2, opened offices in South Korea and Dubai to deal with issues of labor, trade, and immigration. Arrangements are underway to increase capacity at these offices. The Minister of Labor has already visited South Korea and interviews for the youth have been conducted and visas are being processed. 3, developed a national employment and labor policy which places employment as a central microeconomic and sectoral policy pillar and mainstreams employment and labor issues in all development policies. 4, continued to conduct a labor force survey and establish a labor market information system as a basis for assisting government and other stakeholders in employment planning, labor utilization, and making evidence-based employment and labor market interventions. And finally, agreed with trade unions under the umbrella of Malawi Congress of Trade Unions to work together to strengthen collective bargaining as a tool for resolving differences and reaching mutual agreements. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the coming financial year, government will develop and implement National Youth Service Program that aims to train and mentor youth on their skills development. Water development and irrigation. Mr. Speaker, sir, government recognizes the fundamental role that water development and irrigation play in the development of this country. To this effect, government has embraced an integrated approach to water resource management to properly manage the country's precious resource and make it readily available for multiple uses such as domestic and industrial water supply, irrigation, tourism, and livestock production. During the 2012-2013 financial year, government continued to implement the National Water Development Program. In an effort to address the water problems faced in our cities, government has been working on detailed designs for the construction of new water sources for cities of Lilongwe, Blantyre, and Mzuzu. Government has also finalized the preparatory work for the upgrading of Kamuzu Barrack at Liwonde. The barrack will be a state-of-the-art. The barrack will be a state-of-the-art facility which will improve regulation of the Lake Malawi Shire River system, weed management and traffic management. Yes, Barrage. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the 2013-2014 financial year, government will construct a total of 6 multipurpose dams across the country and continue to implement the National Water Development Program and other programs under the Public Sector Investment Program. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to irrigation, government continue to develop more land for irrigation in order to support agricultural production. Mr. Speaker, sir, at the onset of the rainy season, in December 2012, a total of 95,637 hectares of land had been developed, with 45,637 hectares under smallholder farmers and 50,000 hectares under estates. Government continued to implement various irrigation initiatives in collaboration with stakeholders. Among the initiatives being implemented is the Green Belt Initiative. In the year under review, government started to construct 530 hectares of Chikwawa GBI scheme in Salima out of the 6,293 hectares that are available. In support of the ERP, 130 hectares of Chikwawa scheme was planted with soya beans, benefiting 346 households. It is expected that about 180 metric tons will be produced. In the forthcoming fiscal year, government plans to complete the construction of Chikwawa GBI scheme and commence the construction of 1,000 hectares of Tora Rora Ngosi irrigation scheme in Karonga. Housing and urban development. Mr. Speaker, sir, with respect to housing and urban development, government continued to implement a number of programs aimed at increasing access to decent, safe, and secure shelter. Government is currently developing a national housing policy, which is expected to be launched in the first half of the 2013-2014 financial year. In the year under review, government commenced the construction of a clinic at Capitol Hill, which is expected to be completed during the first half of the 2013-2014 financial year. Government also commenced the construction of the new state-of-the-art stadium at Area 48 in Lilongwe, which is expected to be completed within 24 months. Social development, health. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to public health, HIV, AIDS, nutrition, and maternal health and safe motherhood management. Public health. With regard to public health, my government continued to work towards the improvement of quality of life of all Malawians through, among other strategies, increasing access to health facilities and improving the health service delivery system. In the area under review, government, in collaboration with development partners, continued to implement measures aimed at improving access to essential health package through the development of infrastructure. The health services infrastructure development projects that were implemented during the year, including upgrading of health facilities at districts and central hospitals, the construction of new health centers across the country, and the construction of the state-of-the-art district hospital in Katabe. Government also strengthened the health transport system in order to improve access to health services through referral. To this effect, government procured 28 ambulances. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government responded quickly to the stockouts of drugs in the public hospitals by offering an emergency tender so that we could have drugs for central hospitals. Currently, emergency drug kits containing essential medicines are being distributed to CHAM and public health centers across the country. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the 2013-2014 financial year, government will continue working with our partners to improve service delivery in the health sector. The DFID has agreed to bring forward £16 million to purchase essential drugs and medical supplies to enable Central Medical Stores Trust to have adequate drugs that can be sold to district hospitals. Government will also develop a national health financing strategy to guide health sector financing. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, sir, government will upgrade and build more health centers across the country. Nutrition, HIV and AIDS management. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me now turn to nutrition, HIV and AIDS management. In the 2012-2013 financial year, government achieved the following. 1. Over 80,000 acute malnourished under 5 children were diagnosed, treated in nutrition rehabilitation units across the country. 2. Over 98% of children aged 1 to 5 were dewormed, surpassing the 90% target. 3. Launched a 5-year nutrition HIV/AIDS project, which is jointly funded by the World Bank and Canadian International Development Agency. 4. Rolled out a new regime for ART, which has fewer side effects to HIV-positive pregnant women and children. And finally, intensified awareness of youth-friendly sexual and reproductive health and HIV services, which resulted in up to 2.9 million visits by the young people to access the services, which is almost double the target for the year. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the 2013-2014 financial year, government will lobby for more funding from development partners for the implementation of nutrition and HIV and AIDS programs. Maternal health and safe motherhood. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the year under review, government intensified the implementation of maternal and newborn health services to improve quality of care. The presidential initiative on maternal health and safe motherhood has tremendously contributed to this program. It is therefore not surprising that as a country, Malawi is making some strides on maternal and child health indicators. New data from the United Nations estimates in 2012 shows that Malawi's maternal mortality is at 460 per 100,000 live births, down from 675, 100,000 live births 2022. Much as this is welcome development, my government strongly believes that the fight is far from being won. Mr. Speaker, sir, the establishment of the Chiefs Committee also helped in sensitizing communities on sexual reproductive health services and encouraged pregnant women to seek services at hospitals. Furthermore, through the initiative, government is constructing maternity waiting homes across the country. Construction of a maternity waiting home has since been completed and opened at Mulanje District Hospital. The shelter at Dowa Hospital is completed and ready for opening. Currently, maternity waiting homes at Ulongwe in Balaka, Chilumba in Karonga, Nkanda in Mchinji, Lumbazi in Dowa, Malosa in Zomba, Lungwena in Mangochi, and the maternity unit in Senior Chief Quarters area in Cheu are at various stages of construction. Mr. Speaker, sir, currently 200 young women from 20 districts across the country have been recruited through their chiefs for an 18-month community midwifery training program. Upon graduation, the community midwives will be bonded and work for their respective communities for 5 years. The aim is to ensure that mothers do not travel long distances to seek maternal health care services, thereby averting possible pregnancy complications. In the coming financial year, government will allocate enough resources to ensure that these efforts are sustained so that our mothers should not die while giving birth. Education, science, and technology. Mr. Speaker, sir, education, science, and technology empowers people by providing them with the relevant knowledge, skills, expertise, and competencies. To this end, government is determined to increase access to quality education at primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. Mr. Speaker, sir, government has adopted a sector-wide approach to properly plan, implement, and monitor developments in the sector. During the 2012-2013 financial year, government has registered the following achievements. 1. Commenced the process of promoting about 11,500 primary school teachers, over 2,000 secondary school teachers, and 65 teacher training college tutors. 2. Continued with infrastructure development in order to increase access to and improve quality of education at all levels. 3. Commenced the review of secondary school curriculum to promote relevance and quality of education, and finally supported 12,000 secondary school students with bursaries. In the 2013-2014 financial year, government will train and upgrade more teachers at all levels. For instance, our aim is to attain a primary pupil to qualified teacher ratio of 60:1 by 2017-2018, down from the current 74:1 ratio. Mr. Speaker, sir, to support deserving students who need financial support, my government will bring before this August House, during this sitting of Parliament, a higher education students' loan bill. This bill will institutionalize the framework for students' loans. The loans will cover students in both public and private universities. Early childhood development and child protection. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government recognizes that investing in early childhood development programs guarantees high-quality future human capital and productivity. Children also need special protection so that they grow into productive and responsible citizens. In the year under review, government trained 240 district child protection committees from 16 districts affected by food shortage and floods. The committees have been empowered to monitor human rights violations. They will also provide basic child social services, including socio-economic support, early childhood development, and general child rights education to the affected communities. Government is developing a child protection management information system to strengthen the provision of child protection services in the country. In the 2013-2014 fiscal year, government will implement a comprehensive strategy for removing children from the streets. Gender and development. Mr. Speaker, sir, gender parity, women empowerment, and uplifting of women's rights are prerequisites to poverty reduction and sustainable development. Recently, I launched the Malawi Millennium Development Goals Acceleration Framework and Country Action Plan aimed at accelerating progress towards the attainment of MDG 3 on gender equality and women's empowerment. Government also launched a white paper for strengthening the national gender machinery in Malawi. The white paper provides a roadmap to enable the country to move even faster in promoting gender equality, equity, and women's empowerment. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm pleased to report that I have promoted more than 100 women to decision-making positions. These include 9 ministers, deputy ministers, the Chief Secretary to the government, the Acting Chief Justice, 2 Deputy Reserve Bank Governors, the Solicitor General, the Deputy Inspector General of Police, 18 Principal Secretaries, and other heads of government departments. Mr. Speaker, sir, in view of the 2014 tripartite elections, my government hosted a national conference on women in politics, which focused on providing measures to be adopted and implemented by political parties to enable increased number of women in effective political participation. In the 2013-2014 financial year, government will intensify activities that promote the participation of women in politics with the objective of increasing the number of women parliamentarians from the current 22% maybe to 50%, and women councillors from 9% to 50% in the continuum. Social support and disaster risk management. Mr. Speaker, sir, turning to social support and disaster risk management, I wish to inform this august House that government is determined to improve the rights and welfare of the vulnerable and households affected by different forms of disaster, persons with disabilities and the elderly. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to persons with disabilities, you will recall that this august House passed a disability bill that is aimed at protecting the rights and improving the living standards of persons with disabilities. I'm pleased to inform this august House that I directed the Minister of Finance as well to allocate 30% of my salary to the Ministry of Disability and Elder Affairs to help them improve Makoha's service delivery. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the 2012-2013 financial year, government, 1, trained 200 persons with disabilities in vocational skills and other professional skills through community-based rehabilitation program in the districts of Palombe, Lilongwe, Machinga, Mzimba, Blantyre, and Salima. 2, supported 15 deserving students with disabilities through the education sponsorship program. And finally, introduced sign language interpretation on MBC TV with the aim of giving access to information to persons with hearing impairment. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the elderly, government, among other things, supported community-based organizations with 1,650 iron sheets for construction and renovation of houses of the elderly and care centers in Chitipa, Karonga, Mchinji, Lilongwe, Zomba, Neno, and the Sanje districts. In the 2013-2014 financial year, government will inter alia provide low-cost housing to 50 older persons and other vulnerable people and roll out community-based rehabilitation program in Kasungu, Mlanje, and Karonga. Disaster risk management. Mr. Speaker, sir, our country continues to face disasters that disrupt people's livelihoods, endanger human lives and food security, and damage infrastructure such as houses, roads, and bridges. In the year under review, about 60,000 households were affected by floods, stormy rains, and strong winds. Of the affected households, about 33,000 had their houses and properties damaged, while 26,000 had their crops in the field damaged. Mr. Speaker, sir, in response to these disasters, government distributed various relief items to destitute people across the country. Currently, government and other stakeholders are distributing agricultural inputs to affected households with access to wetlands so that they should engage in irrigation farming. Mr. Speaker, sir, the report by the Malawi Vulnerability Assessment Committee in the year under review indicates that 1.9 million people were food insecure. Government, through the humanitarian response program, distributed relief food items to the affected households. To ensure proper and well-coordinated responses to disasters, government launched in February this year the National Platform for Disaster Risk Management, aimed at bringing together all stakeholders involved in the disaster risk management. Government is also implementing and coordinating a number of disaster risk reduction programs and projects aimed at mitigating the impact of disasters, including the multi-million-dollar Shire River Basin Management Program. Local government. Mr. Speaker, sir, local government and rural development is key to promoting local governance and participatory democracy by creating an enabling environment for socio-economic development. In this sector, my government is focusing on the following areas. Chiefs administration. Mr. Speaker, sir, government is committed to continue improving the welfare of chiefs through, among other things, providing houses and offices. In this regard, government completed the construction of a house for Paramount Chief Lundu in Chikwawa, which will soon be handed over. Meanwhile, construction of houses for T.A. Malenia in Nsanje and Senior Chief Sabango in Lilongwe are at advanced stage. Preparatory works for the construction of the house for Senior Chief Mbwana of Usisha and in Katabe is underway. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government has noted that of the 62,000 group village headmen and village headmen in the country, group village heads and village heads in the country, only 22,000 are officially registered. In this regard, my government has decided to bring onto the official register 20,000 chiefs broken down as follows: 15,000 village heads and 5,000 group village heads. The district commissioners will manage the exercise to identify those chiefs that will be upgraded to the official register. Mr. Speaker, sir, in order to facilitate efficient operations of Chiefs Administration, government initiated the review of the Chiefs Act. The review process has currently undergone a series of consultations throughout the country. Matter 4. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm pleased to report that government intends to continue supporting communities, particularly rural areas, with various socio-economic services. As this August House may be aware, the Malawi Social Action Fund MASAF project has been one of the flagship projects for implementing such interventions in Malawi for many years now. Mr. Speaker, sir, funding for the MASAF 4 project, which finances most of the community development projects, is coming to an end this year. And as government, we have already started engaging the World Bank for assistance to finance MASAF 5. Meanwhile, the World Bank sent a project identification mission, which was in the country from the 18th March to 5th April. The mission discussed with government the potential support. Construction of rural and urban markets. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the 2012-2013 financial year, government completed construction of modern markets at Matawale in Zomba City, Dwangwa in Kotakota, Mangochi, Boma in Mangochi, Tiolo, Kamenya in Kasungu, Limbuli in Mulanje, and Ikwendeni in Mzimba district. Mr. Speaker, sir, the following markets are at various stages of construction: Vumbwe in Tiolo and Nkweni in Mzimba. Regarding Nsanje, Tsangano, and Rizulu markets, construction works will start later this year. Construction of rural growth centers. Mr. Speaker, sir, under this program, government has completed construction of basic social infrastructure at Neno and Intalile rural growth centers in Neno and Chitipa. The two centers are ready for handover to the councils. The construction of Nambuma Rural Growth Center in Doha district is expected to be completed in June this year. With regard to the second phase of the rural growth centers, government embarked on construction works at Chitekesa in Palombe, Chapananga in Chikwawa, and Nkhani in Mchinji district. The first phase of construction works at Chitekesa, which includes construction of the market, bus depot, and community ground, is almost complete, whilst the first phase of construction works at Nkhani and Chapananga rural growth centers, which include construction of the market and the bus depot, are completed. Mr. Speaker, sir, government is committed to ensure that the rural growth centers are contributing to the growth of rural economy. In this vein, government is expected to complete the second phase of rural growth centers construction during the 2013-2014 fiscal year. Governance. Mr. Speaker, sir, good governance is a prerequisite to this country's socio-economic development. To this end, government is committed to promote good economic, corporate, democratic, and public sector governance, as well as stamping out corruption and maintaining sound international relations. Human rights. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm pleased to report that the country's human rights record has tremendously improved from the time my administration took over the reins of power. Mr. Speaker, sir, for the first time, Malawi sent a delegation to attend the 53rd session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which was held in Banjul, Gambia in April 2013. This marks Malawi's re-engagement with the African Commission. Malawi has also completed her first ever state party report under the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. This report will be debated by the African Commission on its 54th session in October this year. Mr. Speaker, sir, in addition to this, government has embarked on an ambitious program to clear a backlog of various state party reports which are pending before the United Nations Human Rights System and the African Union Rights System. The report to be presented within the next financial year include the International Covenant Against Torture and the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women. Tripartite elections. Mr. Speaker, sir, Malawi will, for the first time, hold tripartite elections in May 2014. This is an important milestone for our country because Malawians will have the opportunity to elect a president, member of parliament, and a councillor at the same time. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you may be aware, Malawians have since the year 2000 been denied their constitutional and democratic right to choose a representative at local government level. The holding of the tripartite elections is therefore a clear demonstration of my government's commitment to uphold our country's constitutional and democratic principle. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to assure the nation that my government will support the electoral process to ensure free, fair, and credible elections. I therefore urge honourable members to support bills which will shortly be presented to this August House to facilitate the holding of the tripartite elections. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm pleased to inform this August House that the Malawi Electoral Commission has since completed the process of ward demarcation in all districts and city councils. Mr. Speaker, sir, the tripartite elections will be funded by government and our development partners. I would like to request our development partners to support us in providing the much-needed resources to the Malawi Electoral Commission to ensure that the elections are free, fair, and credible. I also call upon civil society organizations to provide the required civic education to our citizens. The fight against corruption. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government's stance in the fight against corruption remains steadfast. It is for this reason It is for this reason that my government has introduced a number of measures to fight corruption. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me put on record that my government will not condone corrupt practices at any level. Anyone caught in corrupt practices. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the period under review, the Anti-Corruption Bureau concluded for 418 corruption investigations and commenced 74 new prosecutions. A total of 34 prosecutions were completed, resulting in 9 convictions and 2 acquittals. Judgments are being awaited on the remaining 23 cases. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the past, there has been gross negligence in the implementation of corrective measures to improve financial prudence, leading to massive losses of public funds meant for national development. The Auditor General's report for the financial year ended June 2011, for instance, states that about 3 billion Malawi kwacha meant for national development was lost through financial mismanagement. Mr. Speaker, sir, fiscal discipline is at the heart of this government. In this regard, government will fast-track the implementation of corrective measures as recommended by internal audit reports, procurement audit reports, and Auditor General's reports. Mr. Speaker, sir, time when these reports were ignored is long gone. Responsible officers will be made accountable on the findings of these reports. Government will also roll out the updated 2013 Treasury instructions as one way of combating financial misappropriation in the 2013-2014 financial year. My office shall provide overall oversight of these measures through organizational performance agreements with public institutions. We need to build and bring back the culture of fiscal discipline in the public service by ensuring compliance with our economic governance laws, provisions, regulations, rules, and best practices. Peace and security. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government attaches great importance to issues of national security, including security of people's life and their property. I am therefore happy to report that during the 2012-2013 financial year, the country's overall security situation continued to improve. The Malawi Police Service continued employing a number of professional strategies in ensuring peace and tranquility in the country. Mr. Speaker, sir, in order to reduce congestion in the prisons, my government will continue to construct new prisons in the country. Currently, construction of Lilongwe Maximum Prison is underway. Public sector reforms. Mr. Speaker, sir, in order to respond to demands for high-quality service in the public sector, government continued to implement reforms aimed at enhancing accountability, transparency, and efficiency in public service delivery. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the 2012-2013 financial year, government started the process of developing the Public Service Management Policy Framework and revising the Public Service Act 1994. 2, continued to promote public service delivery accountability through service charters. 3, completed the merger of a number of parastatals, including SEDOM, MED, and DMAT, which were merged to form Small and Medium Entrepreneurs Development Institute, SMED, through a trust deed. And finally, introduced an organizational performance assessment system in the public service to monitor and evaluate performance in ministries, departments, and agencies. Mr. Speaker, sir, an efficient public service is important in the execution of government development agenda. In this regard, my government will make deliberate efforts to ensure that the public service is incentivized within the limited resources to provide quality services. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will, in the next financial year, effect salary increase to the public service. The salary increase will include an increase will include an increase of the honoraria that we give to our traditional chiefs. The increase will take into consideration the medium-term remuneration package to ensure that salaries are reviewed regularly. My government will be tabling the Public Service Remuneration Board bill to address this and also to address the problem of irregularities in the pay scales. I have also directed that government examines critically the problems of non-promotions of high-performing officials so that we create an environment conducive to high performance. International relations. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government recognizes the importance of good bilateral and multilateral relations with our neighbors and all other governments and agencies with whom we have relations. It is for this reason that my government has worked hard to restore and improve our bilateral relations with the international community as well as with our neighboring countries. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am pleased to report that the government of Brazil is in the process of opening a resident mission in Lilongwe. My government has also reopened its resident mission in Nairobi, Kenya. These missions will help to facilitate trade and investment opportunities between Malawi and the two countries. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government is also finalizing the process of opening a consulate in Tete in Mozambique to facilitate trade and investment linkages between our two countries. Mr. Speaker, sir, Malawi will be taking over as chair of the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC. When we host the 33rd Ordinary Session in August 2013, my government has already started making necessary preparations for hosting the summit. Conclusion. Mr. Speaker, sir, the 2010 Integrated Household Survey showed that the poverty head count in Malawi did not significantly decrease over the past 10 years. Statistics show that in 2004 and 2005, poverty head count was at 52.4%, and in 2010/2011, it had only dropped to 50.7%. The government is concerned by the slow pace of eradicating poverty, and therefore government is determined to rejuvenate rural economies, improve the socio-economic conditions of rural communities, and bring real incomes into households. Against this concern of deep levels of poverty in most rural Malawi, I have decided that for the first time, the government will specifically target the individual village across the country with comprehensive high-impact interventions that will accelerate the betterment of well-being of rural and urban poor. In this regard, I'm pleased to announce to this August House that I will set up the Mudzi Transformation Trust, whose objective will be to mobilize accessible, responsive, and flexible resources to support social and economic projects for the transformation of the lives of Malawians in all 29 districts. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as earlier stated, government will formalize the registration of 20,000 village heads as the trust will work with these village heads to mobilize communities for implementation of the program. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Multi Transformation Trust will be a private sector-led initiative to which both local and international private sector is invited to invest in. I must say, the past year has given me valuable experience on how keen, effective, and responsive the private sector has been in supporting community development programs. The private sector organizations are looking at their participation in development programs in Malawi from both a business and a corporate social responsibility perspective. Therefore, I'm pleased to inform the House that the Trust will be an opportunity for partnership with private sector for the transformation of our nation. Mr. Speaker, sir, my vision is that the Trust will support villages to access social and economic services that address most of their basic needs. The package of interventions will, among other things, include the following: provision of clean and potable water to the village, building assets of households. 3, support farmers' clubs access farm inputs on loan. 4, support rural farmers grow cash crops. 5, facilitate access to markets. 6, provide support for roads, health, and education infrastructure development. 7, provide support for the development of cottage industries. And 8, provide special housing schemes for saving low-grade civil servants. For example, health workers, teachers, community, the extension workers, policemen, and our men and women in uniform. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Multi-Transformation Trust will complement all other existing development programs that the government is currently implementing. It is a vehicle for the acceleration of Malawi's attainment of internationally accepted standards for human development. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to further inform this Honourable House that I will launch the Multi-Transformation Trust later this year. It is my hope that all Malawians of goodwill will join this journey to eradicate poverty. Mr. Speaker, sir, in my address to this August House last year, I had said, I also have a dream. That dream still lives on. I see information communication technology lowering the cost of delivery of services and unlocking economic opportunities for communities. I see vocational education for the youth expanding income opportunities for youth. I see health and economic opportunities empowering our citizens for healthier, productive, and smaller families. I see our economy being transformed. Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, I see in today's newspaper the kwacha trading at 347 kwacha to the dollar. Down from 422 kwacha. Indeed, I continue to see prosperity upon our land. Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, this country, this nation has a future. Mr. Speaker, sir, this journey to realize our dream lives on. Indeed, I see our lower grade civil servants who have been left out for a long time getting an opportunity to own a decent home of their own in their village. I see our rural communities properly organized into modern villages. I see cottage industries established in our rural communities to create jobs for our rural population. I see our villages being transformed. I see a Malawi on the road to transformation. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to reaffirm my government's commitment to deepening our democracy, strengthening the rule of law, and safeguarding Malawi's impeccable standing in the international community at the moment. I further commit my government to protect press freedom, mature the independence of the three arms of government, and continue the reforms until we realize full economic transformation. Finally, Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to express my personal gratitude and that of my government to all Malawians for their sacrifices and the confidence entrusted in me and my government during this period of recovery. The road to recovery has not been easy. Nonetheless, let me reassure this august House and all Malawians that our economy is now turning around. Mr. Speaker, sir, our country is attractive again to both local and foreign investors. There's a bright future for our nation, and to God be the glory. Let me, at this point, Mr. Speaker, sir, pay special tribute once again to our development and cooperating partners for the support that they have rendered to our country. I would also like to express my gratitude to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, and all honorable members of this House for your continued support to my administration. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is now my singular honor to declare the 2013-2014 budget meeting of the 44th Session Parliament officially open.